Alright guys, today we're going to be working on the Fresno Power Sports Rush SR, and we are going to be rebuilding this axle. So my car has about 31 hours of extremely hard usage on it, so since we're in the winter I'm going to go ahead and pull it apart, clean the axle, all the ball bearings out, completely disassemble this thing, and just re-lubricate it, make sure it's ready to go for next season. So you only need a couple basic tools, 5mm Allen. You want to make sure that you use a S2 rated Allen. You don't want to use the chromoly ones. They're a little bit softer, more susceptible to stripping. These are torqued down to 35 foot-pounds with a Loctite, so the breakaway torque is pretty high, which is why I have this guy right here, my 3/8 rigid impact. And the last tool you'll need is a snap ring plier of your choice. Doesn't really matter too much. So we'll start off, we're just going to take all 6 of these bolts out. So we'll put this guy on there, make sure she's in the max setting, and then I like to kind of hold this off to the edge to give me a little more clearance angle to get the impact in there. Make sure that Allen is all the way in there because these have quite a bit of breakaway torque. And then just go for it. So there's one. So that one's not fully sitting in there, so I'm going to assist it with a little bit of a hammer. Ah, there it goes. Just make sure they're fully seated. And there you go. So this is the end that goes into your hub. Just make sure you don't mix up the sides. You want to put everything back together same way you took it apart. So now we're done with this. We're going to go ahead and set it aside. And you'll see snap ring right there. Go ahead and remove that. Okay, once you have that first snap ring removed, I actually need to grab another tool real quick. Grab a small flathead. So you're just going to get this small flathead and you're just going to lightly tap around. Make sure not to damage this. See? Separate that. You can pull that down. And then you should just be able to slide this guy right off. Just be careful that you don't lose any of the ball bearings in there. And we'll set that aside. And then we'll have a secondary snap ring right here. Just like that. And you could either leave these on there, or I usually just pull them off, and it makes it a little bit easier to clean them. Just take your thumb, work around that boot, and it pulls right off. So there's one side. We'll keep this side together. And we'll go on to this side. So this side is the exact same process, so I'm not going to show you that again. It's the same CV. Okay, so we're just going to inspect the splines. Make sure there's no chipped teeth, no damage to it. Okay, so it looks good. So now all you have to do is clean up all this old grease that's in here. But before that, let's pull apart this ball bearing. So you can choose to use some kind of like an ultrasonic cleaner if you want to make this a little bit easier. You can leave all this assembled and just plop this thing into an ultrasonic cleaner, let it do its work. That's what I'm going to do once I finish pulling apart the other axle, which I have right here. So I'll be pulling that one apart, do the same thing as well, but just to show you guys how you can pull these apart and clean them by hand if you really wanted to. You just grab this guy right here and rotate it, and there you go. It's that easy. So you can get in here with some brake cleaner or rag, whatever you prefer. So one thing to note when putting these back together, you have 6 ball bearings, an outer cage, and then you have the inner gear. So this, just make sure that the flat end right here is the end that the snap ring sits on. You'll notice on the back end it has a recess where the gears are. So just make sure that when you put it back together, this flat side with no recess is on top of the axle, like so. Just like that. And then the snap ring will just sit in there. So I'll go ahead and disassemble the other one. Super easy. If they get stuck a little bit, you can just rotate it and get your finger in there and just push on it. And then these always come out once you rotate them, just like so. It's always a good idea to wear gloves so you don't end up like this. Always have a ton of rags handy when working with grease. This stuff gets everywhere. And then once they're cleaned up and they're ready to put back together, if you went as far as I did in disassembling these, it's not too hard to put them back together. So you grab your cage and your inner gear. You're going to rotate it in sideways. Then you're going to hold this in your hand, and you're going to grab these ball bearings and just stick them through the outer cage like that, and you're going to work around until you get all 6 balls in there. It's not too difficult, but it can be a little tricky, especially if you get the angles wrong on this inner gear and the outer race. So just keep that in mind. I'm just resetting it to where it's flat before I move on to the next one, and I just push that outer cage with my middle finger until it's propped up enough like so. Reset it flat, prop it up. And this one's being a little bit tricky. You just push it, a little more pressure, and now that's fully assembled. Just to reference, this is the outer sealing surface that this piece goes back on, just like so. So make sure that when you assemble it, that you assemble it the correct way. Boot's back on, so I'm going to go ahead and press this guy on. It's also a good time to check for any kind of cracks or rips in your boots. This one looks okay. So I'm using my thumb on the inside to walk this around. These are a very tight fit. I don't recommend using any kind of screwdrivers or anything that could damage the rubber boot. Just slowly work it on with your thumb, just like that. Till you get it on enough to where you can just slide her on down. Get your fingers in here. Just like so. Okay, so we'll just slide that guy down. Take your snap ring and your pliers, and you're going to put the bottom snap ring on. Just make sure that that's fully seated in there. Then you grab your CV, slide it down on, it'll sit on that snap ring. Then we could take our other snap ring and slide it down. And again, just make sure that is fully seated. So at this point, the CV is rebuilt. You just need to line these back up. Pull it back down. And I would put a little bit of grease in here. And whenever you grease a boot like this, you just want to make sure that you massage it to get any kind of trapped air out of the boots, which I won't be showing on camera since this is just a demonstration for you guys. So you'll kind of just work the boot up and down just to get as much trapped air as possible out of there. And then I would add a little bit of grease inside this as well. And once you're done with that, you're going to take these bolts, just make sure that these threads are clean and dry so that the Loctite has something to stick onto. So you'll put these back in. Just make sure you get it aligned. It's offset a little bit. Just be careful of the boot right there. Okay. And then you'll grab your stub axle. Again, just make sure that that's greased up. And you're going to line this up. And now would be a good time to add a tiny bit of red Loctite to the end of each of these bolts. Just go through, start them all by hand. And make this a little bit quicker, I'll use my impact, and I'll just lightly run them in. Just go around. Okay. Okay. And then you're going to torque these down with a torque wrench to 35 foot-pounds. Then once you're done, your Allen wrench goes flying. And you do the same thing to the other side, but this one goes into the differential. So you'll have these style bolts going through like so. And that will go into the differential side. When I install these, I usually add the Loctite beforehand. I'll put it in, and then I'll run it till it's snug, but I won't torque it yet until I got all 6 of them in. And you're going to grab a paint marker, Sharpie, whatever you like to use. Just make sure you remark the head of the bolt to this golden boot right here so that you have a visual reference. If any of the bolts were to back out on track, when you have the rear clam off, you'll be able to check visually that everything is still torqued properly. And that's all there is to it to rebuilding these axles. Again, my car has about 31 hours on there. I would recommend doing this every year. It's the end of the season, you got a little bit of downtime, just pull these out, refresh the grease in there. I'm also going to be checking the diff fluid level, and we're going to be checking the torque on the stub axle on the differential. So we're going to pull those out, we're going to clean them up, re-Loctite them, and just make sure that this thing is ready for another hard year. So I'll see you guys on track.